Very good morning to everybody. It's a pleasure to be here and be able to discuss Buddhist academic matters with you. I will have three different subjects I'm discussing with you. One is Buddhist research methodology. Another is debate systems in Kathavattu. The third will be Nagarjuna's philosophy of emptiness based on Mula Madhyamika Karika. So we will have three subjects. But because I will be coming here like 2 days per week for the next 4 months, I thought each day I will do one subject. For example, today I will be discussing with you Buddhist research methodology. And then tomorrow I will be discussing with you Kathavattu. And then the third day I will be discussing with you Mula Madhyamika Karika, Nagarjuna's Shunyata philosophy. So we will go that way. Again, we will start with Buddhist research methodology, Kathavattu and Nagarjuna. So, because we are having a 2-hour lecture here, I thought rather than splitting it into two, I will have whole 2 hours for one subject. Is that okay? Yeah, so we will have, so today I am going to discuss with you Buddhist research methodology. I have been, as Venerable Veluri Alankar told you, I'm coming from Sri Lanka. I have been teaching in University of Kelaniya, Postgraduate Institute of Pali and Buddhist Studies. Subsequently, I joined University of Colombo. And last month, I retired from Colombo University as senior professor of Pali and Buddhist Studies and also founder head of Buddhist Studies Department. And this academic year, I will be teaching in Sitagu Academy, both in Sagaing and also in Mandalay here. So, in fact, for this kind of class, it's okay today we have a class here, but I like to have a class in a regular classroom so that we are having not a lecture really, but the classroom discussion, because this is a kind of public lecture, but this is not a class really. So I thought, so from next day onwards, we will hopefully move into a regular classroom, and then I will be not really lecturing only, I will be discussing with you and, sharing ideas, because I need to make sure that what I say is understood by you. Otherwise, I'm just talking, no point. So, of course, today we will have our lecture and discussion here. So to begin with, I will discuss, when we discuss Buddhist research methodology, I think it is very important at the beginning to know the difference between methodology and method. Now, I understand that all of you are MA students, MPhil, PhD, is that right? Or are you all MA students? All MA. Is there any MPhil students here? No? What about PhD students? No PhD. So you all MA. You are completing your MA, you already completed your MA. Okay, you are completing your MA. Okay. Pardon me? Now in the MA course. Okay. In fact, you go to do research when you move into MPhil and PhD. Also, depending on the nature of the course, sometimes for MA course you will have to write an essay. So that essay is basically a research you do. Now, what I am going to discuss in this class is basically how to do Buddhist research. And in order to do that, first I will discuss with you what do we mean by research. Okay? So, preliminary, there are certain issues I'm going to discuss with you, and not only about Buddhist research methodology, but research methodology in general. Okay? And then we will be moving to what is meant by Buddhist research methodology. First, I would like to discuss with you the difference between methodology and method. Now, when we talk about research, we use these two terms, methodology and method. But very often we use them interchangeably. We think that methodology and method are the same. Actually, there is an important difference between methodology and method. Now, when we say something is a methodology, now when we talk about methodology or any kind of logy, like zoology, astrology, and any kind of logy. Logy means in English language, it comes from logos, to discuss about something, to talk about something. So methodology means the discussion of method. Now method is basically the methods we are using in research. Methodology is the study of methods. So we are talking about two different things here. Okay. So when we talk about methodology, actually we are talking about the study of method. Okay? But methods are usually we use when we do research. So there can be different methods. Okay? But when we say methodology, that is an academic study of methods. It's really something like any other subject we are studying. So we are studying methodology means we are making an academic study of methods of how to do a research. However, when we just talk about methods, what we do is we are just talking about the methods, techniques, the ways of doing research in different, the fields of study. Now we know that basically there are several fields of study when we study. Particularly in a university, when we study, we have what is called natural sciences, and we have social sciences, and then we have humanities. Now these are the three main areas where we study different things. So we do have these three things. So these are the three main areas when you go to any university in the world. These are basically what you study. You study natural sciences, or you study social sciences, or you study humanities. These are the three main subjects. Now, if you go to a university, you will see different departments. Now, departments are subcategories of each of these things. Now, when we say natural sciences, we talk about chemistry, physics, biology, and so on. So in a university, you have a department for chemistry, department for biology, department for physics, department for zoology, and various types of things. All these things are called natural sciences. Natural sciences means they are part of the nature. We are studying, now when we study chemistry or we study physics, what we do is actually we study the outside world. So therefore they are called natural sciences. Now when we study natural sciences, there are certain methods we are using in natural sciences. For example, when you study natural sciences, you go to laboratories and you do certain tests, experiments. So you collect specimens from outside and then you analyze them. So you do these things when you study natural sciences. So we can see that when we study natural sciences, we have different methods to study natural sciences. Is that right? We have different methods to study natural sciences. Now, social sciences are sciences that study society and human beings. So social sciences study society, basically, and society and human beings. In a university, you have under social sciences, sociology, anthropology, economics, subjects like these are social sciences. Because there you are discussing, you are studying the aspects of society. Society is a collection of people, right? Now you can see that there is a very important difference between natural sciences and social sciences. Now, for example, when we study natural sciences, maybe you are, for example, if you are studying zoology, you are studying animals. If you are studying botany, you are studying plants. Now, plants are outside there. You can go to a forest or you can go to a field and you study plants. But in social sciences, what you study is human beings. Now, of course, human beings are very different from plants or forests or animals, right? Human beings are very different. Now, you cannot apply the same techniques you apply when you study natural sciences, when you study social sciences. You have to have different techniques, different methods, okay? And then we move on to humanities. Humanities are like when you study religion, when you study languages. These are what is called humanities. Humanities means basically fields or things that are associated with human beings. So religion is a part of human life. So we study religion. So religion is religion comes under humanities, right? Or we study languages. The languages come under humanities. We study history of human society. that comes under humanities. So there are humanities subjects are different from the subjects of social sciences and also from the subjects of natural sciences. So you can see that these three different subjects we are studying basically belonging to three different categories. They have three different sets of characteristics. So the natural sciences are basically one, social sciences are different, and humanities are different. So again, you know, the natural sciences are natural world we are studying under that. Social sciences, we are studying things related to human behavior. So basically economics, social science, anthropology, things like that. Even geography. And then humanities are things associated with human beings. So their language, their religion, their culture, their habits, all these things we study under humanities. Okay. Now, what I wanted to describe was when we talk about the method, actually methods are, we are using different methods for each different things. Okay. For natural sciences, the methods are different. And then social sciences methods are different. And humanities methods are different. And then, in addition to these things, in addition to these subjects, there are certain other subjects that are not directly included in these areas, but that are helpful to study these subjects. For example, look at these subjects. What do you think about these subjects? Mathematics or logic or statistics? Now can you see that they don't belong in either natural sciences or social sciences or humanities? Because when we talk about mathematics, mathematics is neither natural science, nor social science, nor humanities. Is that true? Like, can you see that mathematics is different from all these things? And logic is also different. And then we study statistics. We study statistics very often when we study economics. But statistics and logic and mathematics, these kind of things, or even computer science. Now what are they? Are they humanities, natural sciences, or social sciences? For example, when you study computer, now in the universities there are departments for computer science. But what is computer science? Is it any of those three things or something different? What do you think? Why do we study computer? Now, in order to do Buddhist studies, you are using computers, right? We are using computers. Or if you are studying chemistry, also you are using computers. If you are studying social science, you are using computers. Same thing if you are using languages, Buddhist studies we are using computers. But then on the other hand, in a university, there is a department for computer science, right? So people study computer science long time and then they teach others computer science. But computer science is not one of those three things. But in order to study any of those three things, we make use of computers. Is that clear? Same thing with mathematics. Mathematics is not the other subjects. Economics, we use mathematics. So in various subjects, we use mathematics. Same thing with logic. Now logic is also something like mathematics. Okay? Now logic is not any of those three things, but we study logic in order to understand these subjects. Therefore, you can see that these three subjects and the similar things. So we can put computer science also in this list. Now these are, and things like these are actually people are studying in order to study these subjects. So therefore these last listed 4 subjects, and if there are any other similar subjects, they don't belong in those 3 different areas, but they are the tools really we are using in order to understand those subjects. So you need to see the difference. Now when we study in a university, we study natural sciences, social sciences, or humanities. And in order to study these things, we also study mathematics, we study computer, we study logic, we study statistics and things like that. So therefore you can see that the method we are using in order to study any of these things is different from the methods from each other. For example, method you are using to study natural science are different from the methods you use when you study social sciences. Very different. Human beings cannot be studied like animals. And then human beings or animals cannot be studied like trees or plants. Suppose you are studying trees in a forest. The trees will be there today, tomorrow, and for months if something doesn't happen. But can you keep a human being like this? No. They move around, they talk, they sleep, they get lazy, all kinds of things. So study a human being, you cannot study like a tree or study like animal. If you study an animal, you can tie it to a tree, keep it in one place, but you can't study human beings like that. So you can see that each subject requires different methods. Okay. Now, when we call methodology, you can see now methodology means a study of different methods we are using in order to understand different subjects. So there is an important distinction between methods and methodology. Okay. So is that clear, or do you have any questions or problems about it? Now this is a very basic understanding of what we are studying in the university. Now this kind of college, you are studying Buddhist studies. Basically Buddhist studies. Within Buddhist studies you study Buddhist canon, Abhidharma, Vinaya and all these things. And also you study languages. But all these things belong in the category of humanities, right? So basically you can say that in your college you are studying humanities. But you go to a larger university, they have not only humanities, other subjects. So in here we can say that we are studying humanities. Even under humanities, we are studying basically only one subject, namely Buddhism. But you have to be aware, you have to know where you are and what you are doing when you talk about the research, okay? Because when we discuss research methodology, we need to be aware what we are studying, what is the nature of that we are studying, okay? That is very important for us to understand further what are the methods we are going to use when we study, say, humanities. Within humanities, what are the methods we are going to use when we study Buddhism, okay? So each subject requires, the different methods. Each subject areas requires different methods. Now we can say natural science is a field. Within that field there are sub-fields. So this is basically how you should understand what we are studying. So when we come to humanities, we know that it's a one different field. Within that field, there are many subjects like languages. Now within languages, we are studying in Buddhist studies, Pali language, Sanskrit language, maybe Burmese, Sinhala, Thai, Prakrit, and all these. So you can see that within fields there are sub-fields, within sub-fields there are even sub-fields and so on. So humanities, languages, and then within languages you can have Pali, and within Pali you can have Pali literature, Pali grammar and so on. So you can see that, each subject going into different sub-fields. So to have this map in our head is very important when you are a research student, okay? When you're getting ready to do research, you really have to know what subject we are studying, right? And then the important thing when we come to this category, the important thing is there is a very important difference between mathematics and, say, chemistry, or you can say history, or any other thing. When we study history, we study some facts about a particular country or particular thing, right? There are certain facts, certain material. When we study botany, we study certain objects and we have certain material, certain facts. But when we study mathematics, do you have any facts about the world from mathematics? I mean, this subject is very different. When we study mathematics, can we know anything about the world by studying mathematics? For example, we say 2 plus 2 equals 4. Is that true? Yes. Okay. 2 plus 2 equals 4. But what does it mean? Does it say anything about this hall, or this temple, or this country, or this society? What does it say? What does 2 mean? What does the other 2 mean? What does 4 mean? Do we know anything about the world? Now when we study history, if we are studying Burmese history, we know about some kings, about some certain monks and what people did and in all these things. But when you study mathematics, I mean, this is the most simple arithmetic. But when you go into very deep mathematics, but even then, do you know anything about the world by studying mathematics? I don't think so. 2 plus 2 equals 4. It is true, but it can be true for, the 2 bottles, or it can be true for, the 2 chairs and 2 chairs. It can be true for 2 human beings and another 2 human beings. It can be true for 2 cats and 2 cats and 4 cats, like that. But then, do we know anything about the world by studying mathematics? No, we don't know anything, any fact about the world by studying mathematics. So what does 2 mean then? Where do you see number 2? Do you see number 2 on the road? Where do we see number 2? Where do we see number 4? We can say 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 chairs. But we can also say 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 oranges. Or 4 men, 4 women. So what do we really mean by 4? What do we really mean by number? Actually, numbers don't say anything about the outside world. By knowing numbers, we cannot know anything about outside the world. But on the other hand, this is very useful. Right? But you can see that now these subjects here, I can say this, you can remember it, these subjects do not have a content. Now if you study history, history subject has a content. If you study mathematics, mathematics has a content. I'm sorry, if you study science, science has a context. But if you study mathematics, mathematics does not have a content. What do I mean by content is, it doesn't say anything about the outside world. We just try to abstract outside world by mathematical symbols. 2 is just a symbol. It can be applicable to any amount of calculable things. But it is a very abstract, very general subject. Abstract. We use the word, it is an abstract concept. It's a very general concept. Okay? So we are using these things in order to understand the external world, but of course it doesn't say anything about the external world. Now, you can be a big expert in mathematics, but does that mean that you know much about botany? No. You know much about history? No. You have to study those things. But you can be a specialist in mathematics without knowing anything about the outside world. So in other words, subjects like mathematics, logic, statistics, computers, we don't know anything about the outside world. Of course, computer is a different thing. By using computer, we go to Google and, we get a lot of information. But that information doesn't belong to the computer, okay? We are using computer in order to get the information. So the computer science doesn't have a content. But we have to know how to use the computer. We have to know the keyboard. We have to know how to operate it. So these things are there. But of course, computer doesn't say anything about the world. Now, these are basically what we study when we go to a university. But then in order to study these things, we have to have certain methods. Okay? Now, in this discussion, we are discussing methodology, namely the study of different types of methods. Do you see the difference between methods and methodology? So methodology is the general study of methods that are applicable to natural sciences, social sciences, and also humanities. So this is what basically we are doing. However, in this particular class here, I am not going to discuss the methods for natural sciences or social sciences. Particularly, I am not going to discuss methods for natural sciences. But sometimes in Buddhist studies, we are also using social scientific methods. So I'll be talking a little bit to you about social scientific method. But basically, I will be discussing in this class with you on methodology. I will be discussing basically the methods we are using in humanities, and even in humanities, the methods we are using in Buddhist studies. Is that clear? Okay. So basically, to make it clear, this is basically the relationship. When we study Buddhist studies, we are studying really humanities, okay? And then in humanities, we are studying Buddhist studies. In Buddhist studies, maybe we are studying different sub-fields that exist in Buddhist studies. the next item I'm going to discuss is research is for the production of new knowledge. What is new knowledge in Buddhist studies? Is it similar to or different from the knowledge production in natural science? If so, how? Now the second question I am going to discuss with you is basically research is for the production of new knowledge. Now when we do research, what we try to do is produce some new knowledge. Okay? Now again, you have to know the difference between here. When you are studying for your first degree, or maybe when you are studying for your Dhammacharya or Vinayacharya, what you do is basically you study the text and you understand the text and you memorize the text. And then you reproduce it, okay? And when you study for the first degree, when you follow the coursework, what you do is, you just study whatever that has been produced by so far, produced in the books. So what we do is, we read, we understand, we keep in our mind. As Venerable Veluri Alankara said, Sunatha, you hear, you listen, Dhareta, you memorize these things. Now this is what basically you are doing. You read the book, you try to understand the book, okay? Now this is what basically we are doing when we are studying for the first degree. Now if you look at about your Dhammacharya degree is basically to know the Dhamma, know the discourses, know the Abhidhamma, and being able to learn it by heart and reproduce. Now important thing is, in doing that, you are not producing any new knowledge. You are not producing any new knowledge. What are you doing then? You are acquiring some already existing knowledge into you. Is that right? You are acquiring already existing knowledge. Now, suppose you are studying Dhammapada. Dhammapada was not written by you, right? So what you do is, you study Dhammapada and absorb that knowledge into you. So when we do that type of study, we are not producing knowledge. We are absorbing the knowledge already that has been produced. Is that clear? So when we do that type of thing, we are not producing knowledge. We are not generating knowledge. We are just acquiring knowledge already available. You read the book and you get into your mind, what is in the book. You are acquiring knowledge. You are not producing knowledge. And what you do is, you absorb what is in the cookbook and then you try to do according to the book. You are not producing any new knowledge. You are making use of the knowledge that there is already. Is that clear? Okay. Now there is a difference between production of knowledge and absorbing of knowledge. Now absorption of knowledge is what we do basically when we read books and when we follow courses in the university. We absorb a lot of knowledge, We absorb a lot of knowledge. It's like we are reading daily newspaper. When we read the daily newspaper, we acquire a lot of information about the world. What happened, where, who did that, and that sort of thing. So we acquire that type of knowledge. So that is what we do. However, knowledge production is what we do when we do research. Okay? When you are doing a research, when you are a research student, you are producing some new knowledge. Thus, it's very important to remember. You are producing some new knowledge. Suppose you are writing an essay and then you read the book and you say, okay, so and so says this, and you reproduces his or her words or ideas. You are not producing any new knowledge. You are repeating what somebody else did, right? So very often we do this. We say that so and so said this. This great Sayadaw said this. Or Buddha said this. Venerable Sariputta said this. What are we going to do in there? We are not producing new knowledge. We are making use of already produced knowledge. Okay. Now this is the basic difference between doing a research and doing a basic study. Now from the very beginning, when we are small children up to this level, we have been absorbing knowledge. We read books and absorb knowledge. We get a lot of knowledge into our system, right? However, doing a research means based on that knowledge, we are doing something new. So every time you are doing a research means the production of new knowledge. So this concept of production of new knowledge is, so the research is for the production of new knowledge. Then the question is, what is new knowledge in Buddhist studies? Now there's an important question. When you are studying Buddhist studies, what is the new knowledge we are producing in Buddhist studies? Can we produce any new knowledge in Buddhist studies? How can we? Because Buddha has said everything. What the Buddha said is true. So what is the new knowledge you are going to produce in Buddhist studies? I mean, Buddha has said everything. We believe that everything what the Buddha said is true. What the Buddha said is in Tripitaka. And then the great teachers like Buddha Ghosha and others have written commentaries. So there is a lot of knowledge in those things. So what is the new knowledge when we are talking about Buddhist studies? That's an important question. Now suppose you are an astronomer. You are studying objects in the sky with a telescope. After studying very extensively, say you find a star that was not discovered up to this point. Okay? You say that you discovered the star, nobody has seen it before. And then in science, what they do is usually, if you discovered that star, then you can give any name to that star, either your name, or sometime your wife's name, or sometime your daughter's or son's name, or any name you can give, because you are the one who discovered that star. Right? Now that is a new discovery. We can say that is a new knowledge. That's a new knowledge. Very clear example for new knowledge. Can you think that something like that can happen in Buddhist studies? Finding something new, like finding a new star or something? Can we find something like that in Buddhist studies? Like natural sciences, it is fairly common. You find some very new things. People did not know anything about those things. For example, you can find, suppose you are a medical scientist, you can find a cure for certain illness. Now that is a new discovery. Nobody knew any cure for this disease up to this point. Now you have found something. So that is a new discovery. You can say that is a new knowledge. But when we talk about Buddhist studies, we have to really think carefully, what is the new knowledge we are producing in research? Some areas is very clear. But in the Buddhist studies, it is not that easy. We have to really understand how we are producing new knowledge. Now let me give you a couple of examples. For example, suppose you are a Pali scholar, you find a manuscript, manuscript. You find a manuscript which has not been discovered so far, which has not been printed so far, which has not been edited so far. So what you do is you edit and publish that book, and you can say that that's a new knowledge. Because somehow or other, for some reason or other, that book was not found by anybody else. So you found that book and you edited it and you gave that book to the world, and then that is a new discovery, isn't it? But then there may be a lot of manuscripts that are still not published. In this country and in many other Buddhist countries, there are a lot of manuscripts, very old manuscripts. We call palm leaf manuscripts. In Thailand, you have heard about Fragile Palm Leaf Manuscript Project. There's I think, American professor who is working there, collecting all the manuscripts in Thailand, because there are so many palm leaf manuscripts nobody has seen before. Now, this is one example where we can talk about new knowledge about something, okay, in the Buddhist studies. And also we can say there are many other ways we can produce new knowledge. For example, suppose some scholar has written on some subject in Buddhism, okay. If you can show that what that scholar says is not true, if you can prove that what that scholar says about this particular subject is not true, then of course we can say that's a new knowledge. Or the scholar has written about something and then you find certain other evidence to support, new evidence to support what that scholar says. Of course your conclusion is the same as that scholar's conclusion, but what you are saying is you are that again you can consider to be a new knowledge in Buddhism. Now you see, when we talk about the natural sciences or social sciences, the knowledge we are talking is different. New knowledge we are talking is different. Sometimes in natural sciences, we can discover certain things that have not been there before. People did not know. So, like in any science, medical science, you can find a new cure for a disease, or you can discover new disease, and then somebody else can discover the cure for that disease. Now all these things are new knowledge, production of new knowledge. Now for example, in the world, all over the world, people spend millions of dollars in order to find a cure, medicine for AIDS. Because AIDS is a very big problem in today's society. And in several countries, they spend a lot of money in order to find a medicine cure for AIDS. Suppose a person can discover a medicine for AIDS. Now that will be a new discovery. It will be not only new discovery, it will be a very important new discovery. Even he will be awarded Nobel Prize, for that. So new discoveries provide new knowledge. But when we talk about Buddhist studies, we have to really understand what is the new knowledge. So basically when we talk about new knowledge in the field of Buddhism or in the field of humanities, we have to understand within that context. Okay. Is it similar to or different from the knowledge production in natural sciences? If so, how? So basically, if we are talking about a new knowledge, what is this new knowledge? How it is different from new knowledge in science? What is not research? Now, in order to understand what is research, it is also important for us to know what is not research. Because very often we don't know the distinction between research and not research. Now, as I said earlier, when we are studying for a degree, when we are following a coursework to lead into some degree, what we are basically doing is, accumulation of knowledge. We accumulate knowledge, we gather knowledge. Now that is not research, okay? And also we can say, suppose you write a book about, say, the theory of karma, then you say, okay, such and such discourse sutta says this. Or you can write, so and so says this. So you collect all the ideas in the books said by others, you collect all the ideas said by secondary sources, you collect all these things and put together. But is that a research? No, actually that is not a research. But that's only a part of research. It's only a part of research. Now very often when you are studying, when we have to write an essay, what we very often do is we collect ideas and present, but we don't have our own ideas. So what we have done is just to collect other people's ideas and put together. I mean, that can be useful. Basically, in an examination, what we do is, what we reproduce in the examination paper, what others people have said. We don't say what we are thinking. We just say what others said. We just say what the discourses say. Suppose there is a question from Mulapariyaya Sutta Majjhima Nikaya. We discuss Mulapariyaya Sutta in the Majjhima Nikaya. So we say what the Mulapariyaya Sutta in the Majjhima Nikaya says. But we are not saying what we think. However, that is not a research, okay? But that can be a preliminary beginning part of the research, but that is not a research. Suppose you have to do a study of Mulapariyaya Sutta, then of course you will have to make a preliminary study of that sutta, summarize the ideas, and having done that, then you have to do something else further. Okay? Now, then only it becomes research. So, it is very important for you to understand what is research and also what is not research. Now, in a research, you produce some new knowledge. You say something new. Okay? That something new can be establishing a new view about it, giving a new interpretation about something, proving that someone else's idea is wrong, supporting someone else's idea with new evidence. So like that, there are certain things when we talk about in the Buddhist studies field, when we say new knowledge is different from the knowledge that we are talking, knowledge in natural sciences. Let me list a few of these things so that we can say BS for Buddhist studies. Now, these are some methods, some areas where some new knowledge in Buddhist studies is possible. This doesn't mean that this is all, but now, for example, giving a new interpretation to some old concept, giving a new interpretation to some old concept. Now, Buddhist concepts have been studied by many people over a year, so many years. Now, maybe you don't find any new concepts, but what you have is the concepts already studied by others. But if you can give a new interpretation to those concepts, then that is a new knowledge. Say, for example, you are studying karma, you are studying maybe pratitya samutpada, or any Buddhist doctrine. But if you can give a different way of interpreting, that is a new knowledge. Now, let me give you an example. Some of you may have heard about one Venerable Jnana Veera. He was originally from, the Britain, a British Buddhist monk who lived in Sri Lanka. He interpreted the Paticcasamuppada as applicable to this world and this existence. What we study basically is the traditional interpretation of Paticcasamuppada by Venerable Buddhaghosa, right? In the Visuddhimagga, Venerable Buddhaghosa gives the traditional interpretation. So we have something like Atite Hetavo Pancha, Idani Phala Panchakang, Ayating Hetavo Pancha, and so on. So we have past causes, present conditions, and then we have future results. So we have Atite Hetavo in the past life, Idani Phala Panchakang, the vipaka or the phala of this life, and also for the next life. So according to Buddhaghosa interpretation, Pratitya Samutpada involves three existence: past life, present life, and future life. Now this is the traditional interpretation given by Venerable Buddhaghosa. However, this Venerable Jnana Veera, he lived in Sri Lanka, but he is originally from Britain. He became a monk in Sri Lanka, and he gave this interpretation to Pratitya Samutpada. He said that it is not applicable to past, present, and future, but it is applicable to this moment of our life. So the avidya paccaya sankhara and so on, he said, are applicable to this moment of life, not the past life, present life, and the future life. Now, it is one thing whether we accept it or not, but it is important because he gave a new interpretation to the old idea of Paticcasamuppada, isn't it? Now that's a good example. Of course, he did not do it for MPhil or PhD. He was not a research student. He was a monk who meditated in the forest. But he wrote some articles about it. He wrote some papers. In his papers, he proposed that Paticcasamuppada is not as Buddhaghosa understood, involving three bhavas, Atita, Pachuppan, and Anagata, but Paticcasamuppada is something that is active in this very moment. So when you say avidya paccaya sankhara, sankhara paccaya vijnanam, it's happening in this moment. Avidya is happening in this moment. Sankhara is happening in this moment. So every moment in human life, he said, Paticcasamuppada formula is happening. Now, that's a good example for number one, giving a new interpretation to some old concept. Now, we usually accept Venerable Buddhaghosa's interpretation. But then, Venerable Jnana Veera thought that Buddhaghosa's interpretation is not the right one, so he came up with a new interpretation. Okay? Now, that is something. I'm not saying that Buddhaghosa is wrong, Jnana Veera is right. No, I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is, I'm just giving you example. I'm just giving you example. Now, there are many new interpretations like that in the Buddhist studies field, based on some research. Now, for example, another example would be usually we understand the concept of Sangha as the Buddhist monks, community of the monks. We understand Sangha to be the Bhikkhu Sangha, right? But then, I think during the time of the Buddha, we had Bhikkhuni Sangha also, Bhikkhu Sangha and Bhikkhuni Sangha. And a scholar recently wrote that Sangha doesn't mean Bhikkhu or Bhikkhuni Sangha. Sangha means entire Bhikkhu, Bhikkhuni, Upasaka, Upasika. Now, this again, this interpretation is new because by the term Sangha, in the Theravada countries, we usually understand Sangha is the Bhikkhu Sangha. In the ancient time, during the time of the Buddha, maybe there was Bhikkhu Sangha and Bhikkhuni Sangha. But basically today we understand Sangha to be Bhikkhu Sangha. However, some scholars say that Sangha is not merely Bhikkhu Sangha. Sangha means Bhikkhu Sangha, Bhikkhuni Sangha, Upasaka Sangha and Upasika Sangha. Now, if that interpretation is true, then of course, we have to reinterpret a lot of other things. When we say, Supatipanno Bhagavato Savaka Sangha, of course, Savaka Sangha doesn't mean Bhikkhu Sangha only. Savaka Sangha can mean Bhikkhu, Bhikkhuni, Upasaka, Upasika, anyone who has attained Maggaphala. But this is a new interpretation to say that Sangha means not only Bhikkhu or Bhikkhuni Sangha, but Upasaka and Upasika Sangha. Now that is a new interpretation, okay? Now then when we go to the second one, proving someone's ideas or interpretations wrong. Now we can do a research, textual research, and show that that scholar's idea is wrong. Okay, he says that Sangha means all four Sangha, four groups. Now you can do a research and say that that idea is wrong. Now if you can prove, if you can establish that that interpretation is wrong, then in the Buddhist studies we can say that that is new knowledge. Okay, but then you can't simply say that interpretation is wrong. You have to give evidence. You have to prove it. You have to look at the text and, you have to interpret the text and, according to textual interpretation, you have to show that, this interpretation is wrong. You can take textual evidence, you can take historical evidence or any other evidence, and if you can prove that that idea is wrong, then, we have new knowledge in Buddhist studies. And then number 3 is supporting some old interpretation with new evidence. Now there you are not coming up with any new conclusion, but old conclusion if you can support with new evidence. For example, I told you 2 things now. One thing about this Venerable Jnanavira's interpretation of Paticcasamuppada to be applicable to this moment. Okay, you can do more research and support Venerable Jnanavira's idea with new evidence, referring to with new discourses. Now that will be so your conclusion is not new. Your conclusion is similar to the conclusion drawn by Venerable Jnanavira, but you are supporting his conclusion by new evidence. That new evidence is something that you discovered. So therefore that is your new research. So you are adding some new knowledge to it. Okay? So in the field of Buddhist studies, we can say that that's a new knowledge. But you are not drawing a new conclusion, you are supporting the old conclusion by new evidence. Okay. And then we have discovery of some text. This is another example. Suppose if you can discover a certain text that have not been published so far. Now, editing, publishing, studying that kind of text can be a new knowledge. In fact, in the Buddhist world, there are so many palm leaf manuscripts that have not published so far. And in the Tibetan countries, in the Vajrayana Buddhism, there are so many texts that have not even read so far. in about 100 years ago, Western scholars and Western people who came to Eastern countries like, Burma, Thailand, Sri Lanka, Tibet, these countries, they had taken a lot of text into their countries. There are large collections of the Buddhist texts in those countries. And some of these collections are in cities like Harvard University and in Munich, in Germany, and different places. So there are so many Buddhist manuscripts, Buddhist texts, unstudied and unpublished. In Tibetan Buddhist studies, very often people study 1 or 2 chapters of a book and produce for their PhD. Not even a complete book. They just study 1 or 2 chapters. So that's considered to be a new knowledge, because that olive manuscript or that text was not studied by anybody. So these are some of the areas, some of the ways that we can talk about producing new knowledge in Buddhist studies. So I think I explained to you what is research and what is not research. So in research, ultimately, you have to have something new that comes up. Something new can be in any of these lines, but it doesn't mean that only these 4 things are new things. There can be many more. I just gave you one example of how to understand what do we mean by new knowledge. We cannot have new knowledge like in science or natural science in Buddhist studies. However, what is meant by new knowledge in Buddhist studies is, something of this sort. I'll be talking about this more later. And then what is not research is, if you just report what other people do, that is not research. If you just describe what other people do, that is not research. If you just list what other people do, that is not research. So you have to be very careful. These things are not. So, basically, basically, these are the things that are not research. If you just describe something, that is not research. If you just list something, that is not research. If you reproduce some other people's views, that is not research. Of course, this doesn't mean that describing, listing, reproducing other people's view is not a part of research. Actually, they are part of research. But research is not complete by simply doing this, okay? So research has something more to do with. Reproduce means you represent other person's views. Of course, that's a very important thing. You read a scholar and you read that scholar's ideas very accurately. That's important part of research, but that's not a whole part of research. Okay, before we move into the next section, maybe we will take few minutes break, okay? Thank you.